Today, we are here with licensed marriage and family relationship expert and published author, Vienna, Pharaon. I'm so excited to sit with you today and take questions from our community. Why do so many people struggle to understand their own patterns? And where should someone start?
Actually, probably people recognize a lot of their patterns, but then they get stumped in the frustration of why am I still in this pattern? I think a lot of folks do know I keep picking this type of person when I'm dating, or I want to set this boundary, but I can't set the boundary when it's time to. So I think a lot of people actually have their finger on the pulse when it comes to what the pattern is that they entertain. But then that frustration of why am I still here? When I know better, I've seen it, I can map it out, I'm so aware of it. Why do I keep getting stuck in this space? And, I think one of our best opportunities to point towards the origin of why this pattern is even here in the first place is noticing your reactivity. Noticing where we hold our reactivity is going to point an arrow to where we have something unresolved from the past. Most of us have an idea of the way that we want to live, and we have an idea of the type of relationship that we want to be in. Maybe there is a style in which you engage in conflict, and every time you're like, okay, I'm going to do it differently. I don't want to shut down, or I don't want to be on the defensive, or I don't want to criticize the other person. And then you're right back in it doing the thing. And so what's really important about understanding not just the pattern is that when we move into a space where we become dysregulated, and so defensiveness, going on the attack, needing to prove your point, all of those things are extensions of our dysregulation. I think it's really vital for people to remember that dysregulation is simply active self-protection. I don't know if you've ever heard it framed that way before, but the fact that we are moving into a space where we're needing to protect ourselves from something. Now, whether that threat is true, real in that moment or not, is not really that important. And a lot of times that threat is just a perceived threat. You have your partner who loves you and cares about you standing across from you. So that's not really a threat, but your nervous system is picking up on something that is familiar enough to it, right? That reminds it. It's a data point that's like, uh-oh, the alarm is sounding over here. You need to move yourself into active self-protection. And, whatever it is, it's like, okay, I'm not going to set the boundary because I want to be liked. I want people to love me. I want people to think that I'm valuable, so I can't say no to them. Or I need to get really loud and aggressive in this moment because if I'm not, I'm unsafe. Whatever it is like we have to understand where we are going in order to self-protect. But in that, unfortunately, is where we also disconnect in relationships, right? It's where we also disconnect from ourselves and from somebody else. And so these patterns, they play out even though we mean well, even though we're like, okay, I want to do it differently, but then we get right back into it and we're going to go towards what is familiar, and it causes us a lot of issues relationally, I would say.
Right. I think one of the things that I've been learning over the course of a few years since I've been in therapy is believing that the thing that I think I don't deserve, I do. And
Hmm.
so a lot of times I would say to myself, no one is going to accept this piece of me.
Hmm.
And I've created this story, and
Sure.
it's a lot of times it just plays out as that. Not that the person on the other side is rejecting it, but
Hmm.
I'm creating the rejection before I even
Hmm.
give them the opportunity to
Right.
accept it.
Right.
Um, which I think, you know, in terms of patterns,
Hmm.
happens over time until you seek the help of a professional and you
Hmm.
kind of start to deep dive into
Mm.
how these things came to be or why you feel that way.
For sure. I thought I needed to be easygoing, boundaryless, what I would tag the cool girl, to be loved and chosen for a long time, right? I thought my worth and my value, and really like the position against having someone leave me or see me as too much was that I needed to move through the world and relationships being super easygoing and unaffected by anything. And I thought that if I was the cool girl, that would be the thing that would make the glue stick.
Right.
And there was there's an unlearning that has to happen there. And part of it is understanding the origin story of that, which was my parents went through a 9-year divorce process when I was in first grade. And the adults in my life were crashing and burning around me. They were not well from
People
my
that you were looking up to.
yeah, the people
Right.
that I was watching, the people who were like, hey, you guys are supposed to love each other and this is supposed to work, but you guys are going through this horrific divorce.
Mhm.
And I'm watching you crash and burn. I'm watching you be unwell. And from that position, whether it was true or not, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The position was, as a little girl watching this and observing this, it doesn't feel like there is room for me to not be okay. And that fear of, if I am not okay, if I am affected, is that going to add more disruption to the two of you who are already crashing and burning? And so the way that I learned to operate and move through life from a pretty early age was to just be like, put my attention and my energy toward sports, music,
Mhm.
languages, and just become good at those things, because that was my adaptation, right? It's like, I see what's happening over here. Here's the belief, the thought that I have about it. I'm going to move through life this way. I'm going to be as easeful as possible, right? Which was like, do well in school, don't get into trouble, don't be a disruptor, all of the things, fly under the radar. And I did those things and it almost reinforced it. Like, great, be chill, be cool, do well over here, and then bad things won't happen. And I really had to practice as I got older and moved through relationships. I really had to practice being affected and letting myself share it. Like saying I'm not okay, setting a boundary, and facing
When
the
did you
consequences.
recognize that?
Probably my mid-late 20s,
Okay.
which is funny because I went to grad school to become a marriage and family therapist
Right.
in my early 20s. And so I went through grad school being like, I'm cool, I'm good, I'm unaffected, nothing to see over here. And then it was life that lifed.
Of
And
course.
of course, I was in a relationship with somebody who I saw a future with, and I really thought I would be with him. And his ex came back into the picture, and the therapist slash the people pleaser, fly under the radar, I'm cool, I'm unaffected, all good over here, was like, totally, like, take all of the time you need in the world to figure out who you want to be with. Just so my heart really gets tender for that younger version of me when I repeat how she responded in that moment.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, yeah, like, understood. If you need to spend time with her, please spend time with her. I want you to, like, that's the right thing maybe for your therapist to say, not your girlfriend. Like, I don't need to be encouraging you to spend time with your ex. Um, in a way that obviously does affect me. And I remember having a conversation with a friend, and it just clicked in. It was one of those moments, the aha really cut through. And it's like, oh my gosh, here's my role. Here's the role that I had in my childhood, coming back around in this romantic relationship where I'm pretending to be unaffected, where I'm trying to fly under the radar. My idea is that if I am so easygoing, you're going to choose me. And I had this moment where, for anybody who pretends to be unaffected, who doesn't make contact with their pain, this might resonate, because I had to say the words, this is not okay, I don't feel respected, I am affected. And those words were so hard to actually get out of my mouth, right? Because it was just something I would not speak before.
Mhm.
And to get them out of my mouth, and I did, I said, I am going to remove myself from the situation. This actually isn't okay. I've been pretending that I'm fine with it, but I'm not. So I'm going to remove myself from the equation. And I think this is the really important thing about healing, is that after that moment, like, no mic dropped. The seas didn't part, no choir appeared behind me singing. It was like, it was awful. It felt like death. And I don't mean that in a dramatic sense. Like, I think healing, when we pivot and we do something differently for the first time, it does not feel empowering most of the time. It feels awful. It's the first time you are trying something out and you're like, am I still, like, is everything okay? Am I still here? Did I survive it? But
Mhm.
it's also the beauty of these pivots into a new way of being, because you do wind up surviving it, even though there's a lot of tears and there's a lot of time spent on the bathroom floor and all of that. But you do wind up surviving it, and it becomes a data point that you collect, and then you collect another, and then another, and another. And I can't tell you how many data points you need before it becomes easier and before it becomes second nature, but you need to show yourself that you can do it differently and survive it. I think the last thing that I'll say about this that I think is really important for people to hear is that you have to be willing to tolerate the consequence. I am not just making a pivot and doing something for my healing in the name of healing because I am going to get the outcome I want. I'm risking something. I'm going to voice to you that I am affected by this. This doesn't feel respectful. I'm going to remove myself from the equation. What I need to risk in that moment is that the consequence is that this relationship might end. It's so hard. I wanted the relationship. It's so hard to risk that and to know that that is a probability when you are saying, I'm out. One of the things that we all need to do is be able to risk the consequence. Healing it's packaged perfectly with a beautiful bow tied around it. It's, to heal might mean that you are going to tolerate something that is wildly uncomfortable for you. But you're going to show yourself that you can tolerate something that is wildly uncomfortable in the name of being true to you, operating in the world authentically, letting your voice be heard, the boundary be set, etc. And I think that's one of the things that we have to strengthen in order to do this work is our ability to sit in the discomfort of it all.
I think that's just a powerful message, because I do think folks think you do this once and then you set it and forget it. But just like anything, you kind of have to really nurture that voice that you've kind of been keeping a lid on for a number of years, right? And the only way you can do that is by constantly speaking up for yourself.
That's it. I mean, it's a muscle.
It's hard.
Right? It's like I maybe your audience is, I don't know if it's a lot of people who like to work out, but like, right, like it's, it's similar, right? Like that analogy, metaphor, it's, this is also a muscle that you have to strengthen over time. You can't do one rep and be like, cool, like done.
I made it.
I did it, right? It's like, it is constantly, and it's strengthening, and it doesn't mean that it isn't hard, right? Like workouts can still be hard even if you are fit. In fact, we want them to be hard sometimes, right? So it's like, yeah, it's still hard, and I am strengthening this muscle over and over and over again. And my willingness to commit to doing it over and over and over again is the thing that makes it easier, maybe more tolerable, right? That belief that like, I can run this amount of distance, or I can lift this heavy weight because I have done it before and I'm gradually moving into that space. And so like, I have a belief now that maybe once wasn't there. Like, no chance I'm running 5 miles. There's no way. And then you run the 1 and the 2 and the 3, and then you're like, okay, I think I could probably do 5.
Doing this a couple days a week.
Okay, this is okay.
Right.
So yeah, it's like we have to think about our emotions and our healing through that lens as well. See it through that lens as well.
Now, you talked briefly about your past experiences, and I think this is a great question. How do early experiences shape the way we show up in relationships and repeat certain dynamics?
It, like, in every way.
In every way.
In every way. Look, our childhoods, whether it's our parents, our caretakers, whoever the adults in our lives are, they are our first experience, our first relationship with everything. Communication, conflict, boundaries, what love is and isn't, intimacy, all of the stuff, right? We get it there. And sure, we have other things that influence and affect as we move through life. School, teachers, coaches, religion, society, media, all of that, right? Like, so we're not going to pretend that there aren't other major influences. There are. But my work always starts us with the family of origin. We want to look there first. We can look at all the other things and see the influence and how it's affected us. But we want to start with our family first because it's the template, it's the blueprint, it's the origin story. And so we tend to move through life with, in terms of romantic relationship, we pick people who are familiar to us both in the good and the not so good. And the good and the not so good, we get a lot of that from our family.
Right.
And of course we are attracted to people for loads of different reasons as well, but we are pulled in from a place that isn't generally conscious to us, where we're like, oh, like there is going to be a pattern here, something here that is familiar. It's why we've heard it forever, like, oh, you married your mother, oh, you married your father, right? It's like there's a reason people say that, right? You married your sibling even, right? Like that can show up as well. And so yeah, our past heavily influences the way that we move through the world, the way that we relate to ourselves, the way that we relate to others, the way that we relate to the world at large. And I'm a believer, and this is what I see in my work, is that which is unresolved in our family of origin, that which is unresolved in our past, comes along with us into our adult life. So anybody listening who has any unwanted pattern in their life today, right, has something from before that needs your attention. And most of us have unwanted patterns. Like I do.
I definitely
Still, right? Everybody has an unwanted pattern.
Yes.
And instead of sitting there frustrated and annoyed and self-critical or other critical, it's an arrow for us to say, like, okay, so this unwanted pattern that's here that I cannot change with just my willpower is asking for my attention. And I've now sat with couples, individuals, families for over 25,000 hours of direct clinical work. And what I have always seen is that it points us to something from the past that needs our attention, that needs witnessing and grieving and, time spent with the pain so that we can actually shift the thing that we want to see in our present day lives.
I notice, even with friends, myself included, we tend to know the pattern and repeat the pattern constantly over a number of years. What do you think it is that draw people to making the same decision, even though that they know it's not relatively good for them?
Yeah, well, that's the difference between the knowing versus the showing. A lot of people will say, I know exactly where this comes from, and yet I have to keep playing out the pattern for 7 years, and here we are again. So yes, one, the familiarity of it. There's, what I'll share, when I met my now husband, I remember thinking, right when we first started dating, I was like, oh man, this is either going to be my pattern or the greatest love story ever, And I think only those two, where you're like, oh man, like, okay, I'm entering into this, and then I can see where this could end up the same way that the previous one did. And look, I certainly felt there were some sensations that clued me in that I think that this might be okay, but I would have not been shocked if it had ended similarly, because I was like, oh, I could feel it. It was so tender. Yeah, it's such a fine line. Now, how I widened that line was that I moved through the relationship, the early parts of that relationship, really differently than I had before. And each time he met those pivots and shifts so beautifully. So for example, told him how I actually felt, set a boundary, said I wasn't okay with something. Great, fine, okay, right? And so I was more willing to exit sooner. And this is actually one of my favorite things when it comes to patterns, is like, it's not so much about never re-entering a pattern. It's about our ability to notice it when it's there and then to exit sooner. That's important.
Is very important.
Yeah, right. That distinction is so important. It's because we don't always know, right? You like meet somebody, you swipe on somebody, whatever it is, and you're on a date, couple dates in, you're not necessarily going to know. And if you give yourself a hard time 2 months and you're like, here we are again, I can't believe it, that's not so much of a problem for me as once you know, what are you going to do about it? One of the things that I do think draws us in is we have an opportunity to do something really reparative if we can get the person who enters the pattern to be with us differently. So somebody who maybe chooses an emotionally unavailable partner for the umpteenth time. It's like, well, maybe this time I will be good enough, worthy enough, important enough, valuable enough to this person for them to change. And so there's a lot of outsourcing, I think, that happens. Um, and where you're like, okay, maybe with this one, it's the same challenge. I mean, it sounds like maybe you and your friends love a good challenge. Where you're like, let's see if I can get it this time. And that,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so I think there can be that piece that plays out that's like, I outsource whatever, my worth, my belonging, me being important enough to you. And all I have to do is work really hard and show you how amazing I am and do all the things and be perfect and this, that, and the other. And then I'm going to get a different outcome through you, as opposed to getting a different outcome through me. And I think that contrast of the story that I just shared about the dating with my husband is that, and look, I don't know that that relationship could have ended too. I could have set boundaries. I could have said, I'm affected. I don't like this. This doesn't feel okay to me. And he could have said, okay, peace out. Right? So it's not that you do this and you get the outcome you want. You got to risk something.
Yes.
Right? You got to risk that the outcome might not be what you want. You have to be able to tolerate it. In this instance, it worked. Okay, like it did. And so that's a nice, okay, it packages well, but I also want to make sure that people hear that it doesn't always package well. Don't just do it because you're like, okay, this is the roadmap and here's how I'm going to get what I want. That's not how it works. But you certainly cannot get what you want if you outsource your worth, your belonging, your safety, your trust, all the wounds that I talk about in the book. If you outsource that to someone else, it gets to move differently because you show up differently, not because you finally convince the other person that you're good enough to be chosen.
Right. And it's also having this idea in your head that because you've done all the right things, that you can predict what the outcome is going to be based on the things that you did. And which is, I think for a lot of folks, it's easy to say, I am this, and this makes me the ideal partner.
Right.
Why would this person not?
Right.
And we question it. We question them instead of saying it to ourselves, like, okay, this person is not for me. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah. And I think that illusion of control, right? If I just do
It's nice
this,
for a lot of people.
that's it. But it's also heartbreaking because you try to control and you think, okay, if I just look this way, or if I just make this amount of money, or if I just this, fill in the blank with whatever it is, then I'm going to get that. And, obviously people experience failure of that hypothesis over and over and over again. And that is heartbreaking. And I think what it does is it just continues to reiterate the thing that is so painful for us, that like, no matter what I do, it's not good enough. And I hate that for people, right? Where it's this idea, like, no matter what I do, it's not good enough. No matter how much money I make, no matter how beautiful I am, no matter how smart I am, no matter how successful I am, no matter what, fill in the blank, like, I'm still not going to get the thing that I want, which is what? Love, to be chosen. It's like love can't be controlled.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the hardest. We want to so badly, but it's a thing that cannot be controlled. It can only be something that you risk and you vulnerably show yourself and hope at some point someone else who is risking something and showing themselves where that meets together. And then you choose to move through life and love and hardship together in a really beautiful way.
Well, and this self-awareness, right, is so important when it comes to the values of relationship. And so what do you think true self-awareness actually looks like, and how do you build it over time? Because I do think that is very much a part of that self-awareness. Self-love very much so, but being aware of, like, it's not a you thing, this person, and maybe they weren't meant for you.
Right. And look, sometimes I think we have to be willing to see where we are participating and where it isn't us. I think actually that discernment of some parts of this might be me, And then also a lot of parts of this are exactly what you're saying, which is it's just like this isn't the right match, or this isn't the right partner for me, or this is more about where they are in their journey. And I think it's the inquiry, right, to the question of self-awareness, right? It's this inquiry. It's this willingness to be curious about ourselves, to be an observer of ourselves, to be an observer of them as well. I think self and relational awareness is key to moving through life and relationships well. And so to get curious, to ask the question, to understand. I mean, one of my favorite questions when it comes to our own individual behavior is, what is the function of this? Right? Like, in what ways is this behavior trying to protect me? Right? And I think if you really think, like, it's a good question, right?
Yeah.
Self-love, you've got to meet compassion and grace with responsibility, accountability, ownership. You cannot go forward with just grace and compassion. This has to come in too. And then that intersection of like, oh, I make sense. My goodness, sweet little Vienna who had to watch all of this. Like, that must have been so hard. And it makes sense why you moved through the world in this way, because yeah, that's what you saw. But now you're trying to make a relationship work with somebody you really care about and love. And guess what? It's not going to work if you keep doing this way. So your awareness is not enough. Awareness is great. And now it becomes the practice of doing it differently. And so yes, we need to ask those questions. We need to get curious. You're going to find lots of beautiful answers there. And then at some point, you're going to have to do it differently, because even though you make sense with context, your sense making doesn't just make all of your behavior okay.
And at this point in the relationship, had you realized that Connor had this patience and grace, this thing that you had probably been longing for potentially?
Sure. Yes, and I think in some ways, because this was our first, like, it's the first significant conflict that I recall, what happens, and this brings us back to another part of our conversation, is that I collected a data point that said, oh, I can do this with you differently. Cool, okay, like, pivot. All right, interesting, this is different. And then I needed to do that again and again and again, and notice those moments where I want to prove my point, or I need to be right, and like, how do I meet that moment differently? And even if I do prove my point, which, look, I still prove my point sometimes, right? Like, I still need to be right sometimes. That part can still show up. How I meet that part is different today, but it's still there, right? And the way that he meets that part is different. And so now I have collected however many data points over 10 years together, and I trust and know, based on our experience with one another, that I don't actually need to protect myself this way, right? We have showed my nervous system, he and I have showed my nervous system that I don't need to protect myself this way, that I can be wrong and it can be safe, that I can let something go and I can be safe, right? Even if I am right, like, I don't need to prove, right? Like, all of those iterations of it can happen and it can be okay. But it's not a spoken promise. Like, him saying, you're safe
from
here.
your partner.
Totally,
Yes.
right? Like, he can't say, you're safe here, you can trust me. Like, that's the words only go so far. They're nice to hear, I think, to some degree, but ultimately we are having to show one another over and over and over again that it indeed is safe. That's the only way that it gets built. It does not get built through words alone.
Right, because the repetition kind of creates that comfort for the relationship.
And proof.
I was going to say.
Evidence.
Yeah.
Like,
the evidence.
Yeah, it's the proof. That's why when people are like, your words mean nothing, like, I promise I'll never cheat again. It's like, okay, you just cheated again. Like, that is not helping. That's not actually a balm.
Right.
You know what a balm is? It's when you show a person over and over and over again that they can trust you and that you are actually safe. That's the balm. Your words are not the balm.
That's probably something that a lot of people need to hear.
Yeah.
Now, personal growth can be really uncomfortable for a lot of us, myself included. Anytime I've gone through any sort of change, I'm affected in many, many ways. Now, what does consistency in emotional work really look like and really mean? for someone?
I mean, I think it's a bit of a ride, like consistency in emotional work, it's like, it's not rainbows and butterflies. As I said before, when I had a really significant moment in my life where I did the thing and it was so good for me to do the thing, but it felt like death after, it's like,
Yeah.
I think people need to be prepared to know that healing work and this deep emotional work, it's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
Like we are pulling up our sleeves and we are getting our hands a bit dirty, but that what comes on the other side of it is it's everything. It's incredible. It's so beautiful. And that does not mean a life without hardship. It just means a life with hardship, with the proof that we can get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, distinction is so powerful for us to hear. The daily work, I think there's commitments to ourselves, and whether that's, look, people like to do different things, whether it's journaling, whether it's breath work, whether it's meditating, whether it's getting out in nature, whether it's doing something where you ask yourself a question. I'll plug the book, right? Like where you read a book. It doesn't have to be mine, but reading material that brings you to that work. Whereas you're asking those questions to say, like, hey, I want to understand what my origin wounding is. I want to know if I struggle with worthiness or with belonging or with feeling like a priority to the most important people in my life, or I struggle to trust, or I struggle to feel safe in relationships. Like, I want to get curious about this, and I'm willing to face the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think asking the question can be hard, but I think a willingness to hear the answer is what really trips people up, right? Like, I'll ask the question, but are you ready to hear what the answer is? And are you ready to meet that answer with the necessary work that comes after it? But little by little, right? Like, ask a question, journal about it. Like, go out for a walk without distractions.
Mm-hmm.
No podcast, no phone. Like, be connected and present, like learning actually how to connect with oneself. We do a lot of stuff to disconnect from ourselves. We do a lot. Yeah. We all do a lot of stuff to disconnect from connecting with what it is that we are feeling, sensing, noticing. And just even practicing that is a beautiful place to start.
It's interesting because I feel like we have such a deep connection to everything at all times, which is why people crave so much to be disconnected, is because we weren't meant to be in the know of all these things that we are constantly being fed. And so I do find as though people are like, oh, I need to disconnect. And sometimes that disconnect is just connecting to another thing. It's not really going inward. It's kind of being out of brain, out of body.
Yeah. And look, like sometimes there's this time and a place for that. Like sometimes we do need to scroll, or sometimes we do, and also making sure that we become intentional about, even if it's a minute with ourselves, right? Even if like, oh, I hate meditating, or I'm so uncomfortable, I can't do it well, right? Things that we hear from people all the time. Sit for 30 seconds, try it, notice. Okay, do it again the next day, right? Like strengthening and building that muscle. And at some point, that 30 seconds will turn to a minute, or will turn to 3 minutes, or will turn to 10 minutes. And I know this well. I was not somebody who knew how to be with her pain. I spent many decades disconnected from it, pretending like it wasn't there. I, for years, said that my parents' divorce didn't affect me at all. I went through grad school clinging to that story. They're good. And what was interesting is that they became friends after.
You said this was a 9-year
This was a 9-year divorce. The longest in the state of New Jersey at the time.
Not that I'm laughing about that, but
like,
9 years.
Right. So we know that it probably did a number on me. And I was like, no, nothing to see here. We have holidays together. They drive in the same car. And those things were true, but it was just a distraction. It was just another way for me to pretend. And so I know, like the next person, how hard it can be to make contact with your pain. We are afraid, like, what am I going to find there? Is going to be too much for me? Will I be somebody who's ungrateful? They did the best that they could. They were far better than their parents were to them. There's loads of reasons why we don't want to connect with our pain. but we must. If we want to change our lives, we must.
Mhm. Now, tools, it's something we constantly talk about in therapy, with myself and my therapist. And I think this is probably some of the best information because people are always like, where do I start? And so, what are a few simple tools or habits that people can start using today to begin changing their patterns?
Mhm. Well, I think one of them is notice where your reactivity is,
Mhm.
because that's going to be, like I said before, it's a great arrow to something that needs your attention. So notice where you are reactive with whom. Notice where you feel like you have an outsized response to something, where you're like, wait, this doesn't feel like it matches what happened, but I'm feeling something big. That usually lets us know that maybe you've heard this before. If it's hysterical, it's historical.
Yeah.
Right? Like these are really good neon signs for us. Then another one that is a favorite one of mine is that you are able to give the advice, but you're not able to integrate it yourself. So if you are out there telling everybody else, like, here's what you got to do, and here's what you got to do, and this is, and you ask this and you do that, but then it's your turn to do it and you can't, that's also a great indicator. So these are really good access points
Okay.
to where's my work.
Right.
Okay. It's buzzy nervous system regulation. It's buzzy. We hear it a lot right now, but there's so much value to it. And it's not because dysregulation is something that we have to fear and hide away from. Dysregulation lets us know really important stuff.
Right.
But our ability to come back into regulation is necessary. So to move from active self-protection, which we talked, wait, when dysregulation happens, I move to active self-protection. But in order to become relational again, meaning relational with self, relational with other, I need to come back into regulation. So many ways that we can encourage regulation is movement. So it could be a workout, it could be stretching, going for a walk. It's going out into nature. We know nature is one of our best regulating tools out there. It's visualization. Sometimes I'll leave clients to close their eyes and to think about the most beautiful place on earth that they've ever been, and to really transport themselves there and notice the sun on their skin, the breeze on their face, the sand beneath their toes, the view that they're looking at, and notice the shift, the sensational shift in their body that happens when they transport themselves there. Breathing, intentional breath work, just noticing your breath, meditation. If you have a pet, sometimes just cuddling a pet is a beautiful way to find your anchor again. And so I think just starting to notice, okay, when I become dysregulated, like noticing the sensation of dysregulation in your body, what happens? Does your head get hot? Do your palms start to sweat? Has your heartbeat started to race more? Do you feel a pit in your stomach? Like start noticing the sensations in your body when you feel dysregulation come in, and start noticing the sensations in your body when regulation is there. Right? Is there ease, calm, peace in your body? What are the differences? So that's a great, like for newbies into this space, that's a great place to start.
What do you think the hardest thing to do in that moment, when it comes to understanding what you're feeling and paying attention to it versus almost feeling it and passing it by? Because I do think people recognize it and they immediately move on because is the association discomfort, and so you don't want to be there and you move.
With the dysregulation?
Yes.
Yeah. And also I think a lot of times dysregulation hijacks us.
Right.
And the hijacking experience is very uncomfortable. And so if I can, either I'm going to stay in it and it's going to spin out, right? So like you get into a fight response comes, and now you're fighting for 7 hours straight, right? And so we like pick it up, or you want to get as far away from it. You've heard fight, flight, freeze, right? This is fairly common knowledge and understanding, right? So we know we can either go up or we can go really down, right? And so to move out of that is not because we don't want to. The faculties have been affected, right? And so we don't know how to move back into regulation. So a lot of those tools that I just said, and sometimes it takes, like we need the timeout, right? Like you have to call the timeout on yourself
Yeah.
to then go and utilize a tool that helps anchor you back into your own body, where you can feel safe again, and then you can have another turn, another go at whatever it is that was happening before. But it's not because people don't want to do it differently. Nobody likes to.
Feel dysregulated.
No,
No.
it's awful,
Yeah.
right? Nobody wants to do dysregulation. It's there for good reason, right? Like it's primal. It's there to keep us safe, but we don't enjoy it. It's terrible for everyone. So we know people don't want to go there, but yet then yes, okay. Instead of, oh, I need to make contact with my pain, that's not probably the best place to start, because I think that is too much for the system. I think going and getting regulated is what we need to do first. And then we can get curious about our pain and what happened there. But we don't probably want to get curious in a state of dysregulation, because that's probably gonna
Not the
either
best place.
uptick or downtick us again.
That's good to know. Vienna, how do you feel about rapid fire?
Sure.
Do you want to play?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we're gonna play some rapid fire. First step to becoming more self-aware.
Notice your reactivity.
Boom. See?
Boom. I'm
She's a-
so
She's a
rapid.
sprinter. 200, 100
I'm
meters.
so rapid.
Biggest mistake people make in relationships. One? Gotta pick
Seriously.
one.
Okay, I'm gonna give you a couple.
Okay, yeah.
Believing that relationships should just be easy.
Yeah.
And that the partner you choose and pick and commit to is not the partner you are going to know in different stages of life. Like
Evolution of person.
Yeah, evolution of person. And I really think I'll expand on this one because I think it's important. We're not going to be rapid with this one.
And that's fine. We don't always have to do what we're supposed to.
I wish ease and joy and pleasure and playfulness and fun for all couples, of course. I hope you choose someone that you laugh hard with, that you have fun with, all the things. And I hope that is a huge part of people's relationship. And life is hard. Okay, if you're with somebody long enough, you will face endless trials and tribulations. And that is not meant to be negative. I'm not trying to be a downer. It's just the reality of life. You will go through so many stages of life, so many challenges. And so I've always said, pick somebody you want to do the hard with. Like the ease, if that great, of course, that is a pillar. You need to have that. But then after that, pick the person you want to do hard with, because you will face hard so many times over. And the thing that builds security and safety and just really the profound nature of love and relationship is going through hard things together and coming out the other side, okay? Over and over and over again. And you are going to meet different iterations of a human at different points, different stages of life. My goodness, right? It's like I met my husband. We didn't have children at the time. Now we have children. We've lost a dog. We've lost a parent. We've done moves. We've a pandemic. Right? Like all of these things that we go through, and I'm 40. Hopefully, I have a lot of life left. And then guess what? More parents are going to die. Right? Friends are going to die. We are going to face challenges in life together that we know nothing about right now, right? And I need to know that we are going to meet each other through this. And look, I don't have a magic wand. I don't have a seeing eye. I don't know what it's going to be, but I know that so far we do hard well. And I've got a lot of data points there that show me that this is a person that I want to keep getting to know, that I'm willing to go be in the trenches with, that I trust that when hard shows up at our doorstep, we are going to get through it to the other side. Now I know that I'm not in control of it all, and there might be some things that get thrown in the mix I don't know about, but I think that the illusion that like, it should, like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. If it's not like blissful 95% of the time, you shouldn't be in it. Like, no, relationships are hard because life is hard.
Yeah.
And so I just want to set that foundation for people. Like, don't expect it to be easy, and don't expect that the person you met is going to stay the same throughout it all.
Re-listen to that. Okay, everyone. A pattern most people don't realize they have.
Well, look, everybody has their own patterns, obviously, right? Like what shows up in each person's life can be different. But maybe the pattern that the collective, I'm gonna take it a little, I'm gonna meander my way through this, is that we don't see the things that we do as self-protective. Okay, so I'm tying everything that we talked about today into this, right? Which is, I think the pattern is that we can become either too critical of ourselves without enough curiosity and compassion, or we make it about the other person. And that arrow needs to point back to us. And so it's like toggling that line of the pattern of being too self-critical and not having enough compassion and curiosity for the self, or the pattern of becoming too other critical and not seeing our part.
The how can they not love me? I'm perfect. What we talked about before.
Yeah. We're tying bows at the end here.
Yeah. Okay. What does doing the work actually look like day to day?
Okay. So I think if you could bring curiosity and observation to yourself and to the very important people in your life every day, like asking that extra question, not just taking it at face value. Like, what is familiar about this? What's the function of this behavior? Again, lots of the things that we were talking about already is to just simply pull some of those things in every day, really noticing the reactivity, noticing the sensations in your body, noticing their reactivity. Right? Those types of things are going to help build these muscles. And obviously it's layered and more complex as we, move through life and relationship, but that's a good place to start in the daily.
Okay. I like that too. What's something emotionally healthy people do differently? Emotionally healthy people do differently.
I think emotionally healthy people distinguish and discern what is theirs and what is not theirs as well. Right, so it's bringing that curiosity forward to be like, is this about me? Like, is this something for me to look at, or is this something for you to look at? And then depending on what the relationship is, if it's a couple, then what are we looking at? But I think my quick response, I probably have a lot of other examples of this, but my first one is that knowing what is mine and what is not mine.
That's where it is. Knowing what is mine and what is not mine.
Yeah. Because we tend to lean one way or the other. Like, it's, I am so bad at this and I've screwed this up and or it's everybody else's fault.
Yes.
Right? And so what is mine and what's not mine? And being quick to it. This is for me to look at. This is actually for you to look at. And I'm not going to take that on. Right?
Such a powerful tool to have.
Yeah.
If you can sort of practice and start to move in that manner, it really saves you so much time and heartache.
Another muscle to build up.
Well, Vienna, thank you for your time today. Y'all, make sure you check out her book, The Origins of...
There it is.
We can get a lot of this information in here, and this was great today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm sure everyone's going to love it. Thank you for joining us for another great episode. I'm Adrian. That's Vienna. We'll see you next time.